It's a Sunday. I woke up today ready to do my job, which is to sit down at my desk and work on the rewrite for this big, long, important to me project I've been working on since approximately 1948 BC. Want to get this thing done. And yet, as I faced the not so blank page to rewrite, I found myself, I had this very sinking feeling that I've gotten before in the past, and it was the inability to work. I felt exhausted, and yet there was a part of me that just wanted to push and push and push. And yet I've been here before. Sometimes I just gotta step away. So by pure chance, or was it chance, this morning in my YouTube feed, instead of videos of sharks trying to eat people, which keeps showing up in my feed, because once, at the dawn of the internet 20 years ago, I watched 4 seconds of a shark video, and now that's all I get in my feed. I promise you, I never watch any videos of sharks eating people, lions eating people. I don't care about men climbing up the sharp sheen faces of cliffs. I don't care about car wrecks or car crashes or anything. But at some point in my some point in my viewing history, getting a little bit excited here. At some point in my viewing history, I watched some high energy Mountain Dew, highly caffeinated energy drink type video of some testosterone-y guy doing some testosterone-y thing with an animal, and now the algorithm thinks I really want to watch that. And what I really want to watch is what it actually showed me today, which was a video about a philosopher. Now I've done videos about this guy in the past. I will leave a link to the video I did below in the scene description, in the video description below. I'll leave a link to this video. And I will also leave a link to the video that I listened to today by somebody else. I think it was maybe like called Philosophize This or something, about Byung-Chul Han, whose ideas I want to talk with you about today. Byung-Chul Han is a South Korean-born philosopher. He teaches in Germany. He kind of is an unambitious philosopher. He writes, as you can see, these very thin books. This one here that I have is called the Burnout Society. This one, also very thin, is called In the Swarm. It's like 70 pages. And then right here we have the Philosophy of Zen Buddhism by Byung-Chul Han, which I haven't finished yet. Mostly what he's talking about in here is very carefully taking a look at Hegel and Heidegger. Byung-Chul Han lives in Germany. I don't know if I said that. Teaches in Germany. And it was within the German philosophical tradition. Now, he's also what could be called a continental philosopher, which I think is just another term for a postmodern philosopher or a post-structuralist philosopher. Excuse me, I've got saliva in my mouth. I'm going to swallow. Thank you. So, I want to just quickly summarize kind of the problem that Byung-Chul Han presents, a problem that I could relate to today when I felt burnout and exhaustion. And then I want to talk just a little bit about what he offers as a solution. One very interesting thing Byung-Chul Han does right out of the gates in his most famous book, The Burnout Society, is sort of set himself up as not necessarily in opposition to, but as picking up where the French philosopher Michel Foucault not quite leaves off, but where his philosophy kind of falls short as an accurate critique of our era. Okay, so Foucault, to the best of my knowledge, because I can't get through the guy, although some of his prose is smurfly bewitching. I was listening to the audiobook of one of Foucault's books the other day. I can see why so much of modern academia is under Foucault's spell. He gives you this feeling that if you become a thinker like him, then you are part of an elite cognoscenti that is rebelling against an extremely oppressive and repressive society. So Byung-Chul Han says, look, I keep dropping things. Byung-Chul Han said, I'm in my own personal Mercury retrograde today. So if the ceiling falls in and crushes me to death, at least I was giving you Byung-Chul Han when it happened. What Byung-Chul Han says is, I'm not quite sure why we're all so still in the thrall of Foucault and his notion of a disciplined society. So a disciplined society is like a society of religion, a society of psychiatry. So a society of right and wrong, a society of insiders and outsiders, a society of discipline and punishment. So what Byung-Chul Han says, it's a disciplined society, the one that Foucault describes, is a society of hospitals, madhouses, prisons, barracks, and factories. Okay? He says it's a society of prohibitions, commandments, and the law. That's Foucault's society. But what Byung-Chul Han says is, wake up, man. We live in post-capitalism, neoliberalism, and there's a different world that we live in. I was born into a different world. And I know this is true, and I never hear anybody speaking to it, and that's why I feel it's so important to share with you. Okay, well, what kind of world are we living in? What kind of world was I born in? What kind of world were you born in? It's not the society of prohibitions and commandments, is it? Byung-Chul Han says, that society has long been replaced by another society, another regime, namely a society of fitness studios, office towers, banks, airports, shopping malls, and genetic laboratories. He says 21st century is no longer a disciplinary society, but rather 21st century is an achievement society. So I was trying to get into that society this morning as I was taking my poor little brain, which is like the exhausted horse in Dostoevsky's Crimes and Punishment that can't move another step on the road. And I was like the evil horse owner in that book who starts whipping the eyes of his horse. Like my brain is like, I can't do it anymore. I'm exhausted. And I'm like, you will perform. You will write a book. You will write a great book. Dropping things again. Byung-Chul Han says, disciplinary society, or the society of religion, the society of factories, the society of early 20th century and late 19th century, that disciplinary society was governed by the word no. Like, no, you're not allowed to do that. You must do this. Well, what Byung-Chul Han says is if we still think that our society is governed by no, we have not caught up to the present moment. Okay, that's what that's what so much philosophy does so well for me when it's working, is it catches me up to the present moment. It gets my thinking out of the past, because usually conventional thought during any given time period is behind where it should be. It's not caught up to the present moment. I think this guy is caught up to the present moment. So he says, disciplinary society is governed by no. It's negativity. So in other words, the philosophy or the system of judgment and category that arises out of this no gives us what? It gives us madmen and criminals. Okay, but if we don't live in that disciplinary society, if we live in an achievement society, what kind of categories of people does that give us, i.e. people who don't fit in? And he says, achievement society creates depressives and losers. So in this achievement society, we are all these atomized individual subjects. We don't exist within a certain context wherein we are given certain duties and we have certain responsibilities. I mean, when you that was the previous society, that was the discipline society, right? And what is every single solitary American movie or sitcom or popular book about? It's about somebody who's raised in a certain environment that represses them and doesn't allow their perfect inner individuality to flourish. And so this person must rise above and break through these repressive circumstances and flourish in all their great and glorious individuality, right? What Byung-Chul Han is saying is, no, that's not the world that we live in anymore. We're actually all fairly alone, and individualism is now completely taken for granted. You don't have a preset responsibilities or duty. Your only job is to invent yourself continually and repeatedly. So he has this great line that you might appreciate. I know I did. He said, so first of all, we don't live in a repressive society. We live in a depressive society. So we have people that push themselves so hard, that work and work and work. People that are obsessed with themselves and with self-improvement projects, obsessed with presenting themselves on Instagram a certain way, on Facebook or on YouTube a certain way. I've got all the lights in the room here so you don't see the bags under my eyes, right? We are continually expected to say yes. Yes, we can. This is no longer a negative no society, but it's a positive society. We have ruled out negation in Byung-Chul Han's achievement society, and everything is positive now. We say yes, yes, yes. Can you work more hours? Yes. Can you work from home? Yes. Can you work on the weekends? Yes. Of course, I can't say no, because only a loser would say no, right? Only somebody who doesn't want to achieve, who doesn't want to push themselves into new territory, who doesn't want to be better, who doesn't want to grow. Only a loser, only a depressive would say no. So we say yes, yes, yes. And then, of course, what eventually happens is burn out. We burn out. And Byung-Chul Han says, we burn out or we get depressed. We collapse. And he says, the depressed individual is unable to measure up to all these standards that he's putting on himself and that the culture is putting on him. The depressed individual is unable to measure up. And this is my favorite line. He is tired of having to become himself. This is actually Byung-Chul Han quoting someone called Elaine Ehrenberg. The depressed individual is unable to measure up. He's tired of having to become himself. So living in a society that says you can be a lawyer, you can be president of the United States, you can be a YouTube influencer, you can be anything you want. Just create yourself like everybody else out there, like all other, 350 million Americans. You be you, you do you. And this is a very special and important point that's being brought up here. After a while, sometimes we get a little bit tired of having to become ourselves. Right at the beginning of the Burnout Society, which I just sat here for about an hour and a half in my own space, rereading, totally forgot about even making this video. In the very beginning of this book, Byung-Chul Han does something interesting and incredibly sophisticated and difficult to get across, but I'm going to try to because I think it's important. So he starts off by saying every age has its signature afflictions. And he says that neurological illnesses like depression, ADHD, borderline personality disorder, and burnout syndrome mark the landscape of pathologies of our era. And what he says is that these are not infections, but what he calls infarctions. So these pathologies do not follow from an excess of negativity or no, as I said earlier, but from an excess of positivity. Okay, so he says more and more contemporary society is emerging as a constellation that escapes the immunological scheme of organization and defense altogether. It is marked by the disappearance of otherness or foreignness. So I'm going to stupidify what he's trying to say here for myself and maybe for you. I think what he's saying is we live in an era where everything can become included in the picture as a product of consumption or as a lifestyle. Like there is no other. The other is co-opted and offered for consumption in one way or another. So there's no way out of the system in an achievement society. One thing he says is foreignness itself is being deactivated into a formula of consumption. Okay? He says there's nothing alien anymore. He says the alien is giving way to the exotic, and the tourist just travels right through it. He goes on to say, excessive positivity also expresses itself as an excess of stimuli, information, and impulses. It radically changes the structure and economy of attention, and perception becomes fragmented and scattered. So in another book, he basically talks about the smartphone, and he says basically with algorithms, we propagandize ourselves, okay? We feed our attention to the algorithms that dictate what we see on the internet, and then the algorithms give us back more of what we want or what we asked for, and then we become more like ourselves in a weird sort of excruciatingly impenetrably narcissistic way. So one thing that Byung-Chul Han says is that we live in a very, very narcissistic age. And in an age of narcissism, what disappears is the other, the alien, otherness, the foreign, maybe even the scary, the truly different. So he says that it's kind of funny that we seem to lionize notions of difference in our multicultural age. We flatter ourselves to think that we're very accepting. But what he says is that's not quite what's happened. What's happened is that we've smothered the other. We smother the other. Maybe I'll call this video The Other Smother. Okay? We smothered the other. And it's been blanketed and co-opted in this great big commercial marketized sameness, okay? And he says, here's the example of it. He says the smartphone. He says in the past, like slaves were branded. And he says, you know what the branding is in our age? It's self-branding. We brand ourselves on Instagram. I brand myself on YouTube. We brand ourselves at work. I'm this kind of person, Jack. What kind of person are you? I'm this kind of person. What kind of person are you? We're self-branding. And he says the smartphone is like the brand of our slavery. Like we carry it around. He says the smartphone is like a rosary, okay? It's something that people who are under the control of a religion carry around a rosary and beads, right? And they touch it and they hold it and it reaffirms their connection to the great beyond. Sound familiar? It sounds like what I do with this device I'm looking at right now, my smartphone, right? He says like, we all belong to the church of Facebook. And when we like something on Facebook, it's the digital amen. One of the things I like about Byung-Chul Han, in closing, is that he is a very generous philosopher. Like, first of all, when you write a book that's very thin like this and very aphoristic, you are giving a gift to the reader. You're allowing them to take a very rich phrase and digest it over a longer period of time on their own without your having to unpack and explain everything. Like in a book like Being in Time by Heidegger, or I think Being in Nothingness by Hegel. Both of which are philosophers and books that he sort of, I guess you could say, I don't know how to put it. He just speaks to the Western notion of God and the Eastern notion of nothingness or shunyata in this book, The Philosophy of Zen Buddhism. And I think he offers us some solutions, some really clear paths out of achievement society and depression and burnout and the fear of becoming a loser. So one interesting thing that he says in this book, Philosophy of Zen Buddhism, like I said, is he's very gently kind of deconstructing Hegel and Heidegger. And one thing that he notes again and again in this book, which I have not finished, is that the Western philosophers are always positing something. And so he straight up says Hegel misinterprets Buddhism. Hegel posits Buddhism's nothingness as a something and then proceeds to give that something characteristics. But Byung-Chul Han says this is classic Western bullshit philosophically. He says Buddhism's foundation is an empty center that does not exclude anything, that is not occupied by a holder of power. So one thing that he's done in previous paragraphs is show how Hegel sets up God as the big shot, as the end game, the dialectic towards which history is evolving, the Geist or the spirit, and i.e. the ultimate holder of power. So there's always this oppression in Western philosophy, especially the Germans. So he says Buddhism does not set up an occupier of power. It does not set up a center or a locus of power, and there's not a circle of power in which we are all trapped, right? It's empty. And this emptiness, this absence of an exclusive subjectivity is what makes Buddhism friendly. I love how he uses the word friendly in this book. He uses it over and over and over again, says Buddhism is friendly. That's curious. Hey, what's up, man? You're not the locus of power. I'm not the locus of power. There's not a gradation of higher and lower here. There's not a hierarchy. Let's talk. This is Byung-Chul Han trying to reestablish the other, the foreignness, the confrontation with something that is not yourself. And the reason that this is so important is because A, it's not narcissistic, and B, when there's something that is not you, that you come into genuine contact with, connection is possible. And Byung-Chul Han says that we are in a crisis of non-connection. We are in a crisis of connection. We're all trying to connect but can't connect in our society. We're screaming at each other on the internet. We're screaming at people we disagree with, and nobody's really truly open to and listening to anyone, and no one is having their heart filled by being listened to by someone else. We are narcissistic uber subjects who are always, like I am right now, speaking, okay? So Byung-Chul Han says at one point, the point is let's try and become a resonance chamber for the other person to speak themselves free. Let us find moments where we can truly listen to the other. Let us empty ourselves of self. Okay, so in this book he says the worldview of Buddhism is not directed upwards or up to God, nor is it directed towards a center of authenticity, right? We're always striving to be authentic, our true selves in the West. It's me, you do you, have it your way, Burger King, etc. He says, no, we're not directed upwards, we're not directed towards a center. He says, Buddhism lacks a ruling center. Or one might also say, the center is everywhere. Every being forms a center. My teacher, Joshu Sasaki, used to say, Buddha is the center of gravity, and everybody is a Buddha, and everybody has their own center of gravity, right? You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to look up. You don't need to look in. You don't need to achieve. You don't need to do Andrew Huberman's diet of physical improvement. You don't need to dunk yourself into a cold plunge. You don't need to get your game on and follow Andrew Tate into the bedroom of beautiful women and whatever it is that he preaches. You don't need to do Jordan Peterson's cleaning up your room. Fuck cleaning up your room. Leave it a mess, all right? He says, we're friendly beings, Byung-Chul Han. As friendly beings that do not exclude anything, each being reflects the whole in itself. Do you see where this is going? It's like, it's going to meditation. It's leading to the meditation cushion. You're not looking out, you're not looking in, you're just being. And as you be, you reflect the whole in yourself, okay? He says, all beings de-internalize themselves, open up boundlessly towards a world-like openness, okay? He's quoting someone here, I think it's Blake. Someone who has come to know a single particle knows the whole universe. In a single plum blossom, the whole universe blooms. So for me, this, and I'm only on page 7 of this book, it offers a cleanness, a perspective of cleanness, and a perspective of wholeness, standing on your own 2 feet instead of needing the world to affirm you, and because it's never going to be enough, and you can't affirm yourself either. That's one thing that he talks about in one of his books, which I've dropped on the floor, is that if you are the person who determines your own path completely, then you're the only one that can know if you're succeeding and achieving. But he says this sense of self is very slippery and ephemeral and intangible and ultimately doesn't exist. And so there's nothing there to truly affirm you. If you're going to do you, if you do you, and I sort of lost track with where I was going with that. But I think you get the basic point here. I'll trail off the way Byung-Chul Han trails off here. He says, the nothing that is Zen Buddhism, or the nothing of Zen Buddhism, does not offer anything to hold on to. No self, no success, no achievement, no solid ground that one could be sure of or ascertain. Nothing that one could cling to. He says the world is without a ground. And he's quoting some Zen master here, I don't know who. There is no roof over the head, and no earth under the feet. Yeah? He says, with one blow, the vast sky suddenly breaks into pieces. Holy, worldly, both vanished without a trace. In the untreadable ends the way. So he says the spiritual force of Buddhism is that it can transform groundlessness into a unique hold and abode, and can enable one to inhabit the nothing, can turn the great doubt into a yes. The path does not lead to transcendence, he says. Transcendence of the self or success or achievement or anything. It leads to this present moment right now and right here, in its dirtiness, in its simplicity, in its loserness, in its depression, in its magnitude, and in its smallness. Leads to this moment right here and now. He says, one cannot flee from the world because there is no other world. I feel like these are important words. Well, I got a little jacked up on Byung-Chul Han today, but I hope that gives you a little bit of a taste of his philosophy and what I think he has to offer our postmodern condition, whatever that is. If you enjoyed this video and you want to help this channel, you can give me a digital amen, which is hit the like button. You can also hit subscribe and hit the notifications, and that lets you know when I put a new video up here, and it helps this channel. If you want to also help this channel, you can go to Patreon and support this channel there. One of the reasons I've thinking about Byung-Chul Han and thinking about this Zen Buddhism in this particular way today is because I'm going to do a sit with my patrons. We're going to sit on a cushion and manifest nothingness. No achievement, no trying to do anything, no this or that, no here nor there. We're just going to sit and breathe on a cushion today. It's Sunday. It's time for a Sunday sit. These are this is something that I offer to my patrons, and if you want to become a patron, you can be part of that, and you can support me on Patreon here. I'm exhausted. I've enjoyed giving this video. I drank too much green tea today, as is always the case with these videos. So I'm going to go take a long walk in Prodder Park and then do this meditation sit. Maybe you could turn off your damn computer and get off of Facebook and do a sit now too if you're so inclined, and just be totally silent, achieving nothing, doing nothing, learning nothing, giving no algorithm your attention and no platform your attention, giving your attention to that beautiful in-breath and that beautiful out-breath, giving your attention to your very being that God gave you, that nature gave you, that Christ gave you, that Buddha gave you, that nobody gave you, that you're giving yourself, that's arising right now through you, the nothingness that Byung-Chul Han talked about, manifesting through you. Beautiful. Let's do that instead of watching YouTube.